So we have to look at how are we trained right now? Because it's all about education. Who educated us? Brothers, sisters, fathers, mothers, preachers, teachers. All these people created who we are right now because we accepted their training. Now, when we're talking about brainwave entrainment, we can't use those things so much. We have to use light, sound, and vibration because our body is already entrained to that. So to give you an example, if we don't get to sleep before 12 o'clock at night, we lose out on the melatonin production. In fact, every hour before 12 that we sleep, wherever we're at in the world, we get 2 times the melatonin production out of our brain. Every night when we go to sleep at 2 o'clock in the morning, our body is going to raise its temperature 2 degrees. Now, if you have a dysregulated brain, it can go as high as 5 degrees, which means you can wake up in the middle of the night with sweats and you get anxious and stressed out and worried. Now, once you train your brain to sleep, what happens is when you don't have the right training, then you get dysregulated and you go out of that rhythm. When we were in ancient times, we would watch a fire before going to bed. Remember that fire is at 10 hertz frequency, so it's down regulating our nervous system after our fight or flights throughout the day. But also we're getting infrared light right before bed, just like all the biohackers do. But they were doing it naturally in ancient. So I like to tell people all we're doing is we're taking ancient traditions and making modern technology.
Welcome my guest, Dr. Patrick Porter. He's a neuroscience expert, creator, and CEO of BrainTap. Dr. Patrick Porter is award-winning author, educator, consultant, entrepreneur, and speaker with 20 years of experience operating the largest self-help franchise in the world. He has become a highly sought-out expert within the personal improvement industry, having sold over 3 million of his self-help products worldwide. Dr. Porter has been on the cutting edge of brainwave entrainment technology for 32 years. His team was voted the best new health app at 2019's Consumer Electric Show. His newest brain training platform, BrainTap, is distinctively designed to activate the brain's neuroplasticity. The BrainTap headset uses light and sound technology in combination with Dr. Porter's visualization audio sessions to help people achieve brain fitness, overcome stress, lose weight, stop smoking, manage pain, accelerate learning, and enjoy superb sleep and make any number of lifestyle improvements. All right. I am welcoming on a phenomenal guest that I'm so excited to dive in a conversation with, that I know everybody is going to be just as intrigued as I am about what we're going to talk about today, which is Dr. Patrick Porter. Thank you for being on Passion, Love, Pursuit podcast.
That's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Erica.
Absolutely. As I was talking about offline, I heard about Dr. Patrick Porter actually when I first went to the Health Optimization Summit last year in London. And it was actually one of the sponsors of the Health Optimization Summit, as well as the sponsor for the Biohacking Conference. So as you know, like the biohacking world very much respects what we're going to talk about today and the device that he has created, which is called BrainTap. So we'll go deep into that, but I just really want to thank you for, my goodness, what you've created. I've heard such great response to your device, and I know a lot of biohackers stand behind it. So I'm excited to go deep into this. So you, for people that don't know you, I did an intro early on, but you are actually you have actually been in this industry for quite a while now. Over 32 years, you've been on the cutting edge of brainwave technology. So, of course, I want to know where that all began.
Yeah. Well, my dad was one of the first Silva instructors. So if you ever heard of the Silva method, I grew up with that. My dad was a very gifted alcoholic, so anytime things were going right, he would seem to go off the wagon. And one day the priest and nun came over and said, "Hey, we have this seminar we want you to attend, Michael." And changed his life. He never drank again and went back home and said to the family, I was 12 years old at the time, and said, "We're going to learn Silva." So nightly we would do our Silva. And then I still feel like I'm helping my dad because every other weekend we were setting up seminars and he was doing his, presentation to people. And there's something called the Silva sound. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but it's a weird sound. And what we found out was that was isochronic tone generator. And so that started me in my research. I went to school for electronics and, of course, never going to do what my dad was doing. That was what dad did. And then, but I kept helping him with his seminars, and then he let me do a little bit of the seminar. And pretty soon I'm doing the whole seminar. And, he's, I just found out that I loved it, and I've been doing it my whole adult life, really.
Wow. Okay. So for people, if you could give a little synopsis on the Silva method, because for those that don't know it, to know what this is exactly and kind of just to know your background.
Okay. Well, Silva is something they used to call it the Silva mind control, but people didn't like that word mind control, but he meant controlling your own mind. So you learn, they call it going to level, which is alpha. That's a brainwave. Think of alpha as neutral for the brain. And there's a lot of wonderful things that happen. And when we get deeper into brainwaves, maybe I can go into that. But when you get into this alpha, your body basically starts to create more acetylcholine, which is the feel-good neurotransmitter. So you get all the benefits of that as well, meaning that you have more joy, more happiness, more success. You have that feeling of acceptance. So that's one of the reasons people meditate. They get that payoff. They get that neurological payoff. But the other thing is that they taught you how to manifest. Before The Secret, before What the Bleep Do We Know, Silva was out there teaching people that what you think about, you bring about, kind of like Napoleon Hill was doing. So they basically kind of married the two, but it was more of a spiritual journey, Silva was, because it told you, hey, you're not just this physical person. And now with the NIH actually saying we have a biosphere, which means we have this energy field in mainstream science is now saying we have it. It's kind of, in the past, people thought I was kind of crazy, and my dad was a little weird. But now with everybody so stressed out, people are seeking us out and saying, hey, we need some help here.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So what that brought you to years down the line, you actually developed something before you've developed the brain tap. So can you kind of walk us through what happened in your journey of that led you into creating now what we know as the
Yeah,
brain tap?
actually, I had a series of what I would call divine appointments that put me in a situation where I met a person named Lene Reed, who had a device called the SILS, a sensory input learning system. And it was about the size of a microwave, and you had to run it all by hand. And it was biofeedback, not neuro. There was no neurofeedback back then. So people are going, that sounds like neurofeedback. There was no neurofeedback. And what we did is we looked at hand temperature, respiration, heartbeat, all of these parameters, and we could adjust the light and the sound, very much like what BrainTap does with retinal flashing and tones. But we'd run it all by hand. There was no computer chip. Like if you think about that, it seems odd for me to think that to me, it's not that long ago. But when you think about it, 30 something years back in 1985 when I met them. And so what happened was the inventor of that technology, I found out about it, passed away. And I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. That's why I say divine appointments, because
Yeah.
they didn't know what to do. They were going to just junk the whole project. And I said, wait a minute, I have a degree in electronics. I went to school first for electronics. So I said, where are you going to go after this event? Because I met them in Las Vegas. And they said, well, we don't have any place to go but Scottsdale, Arizona. That's where our family is. And I said, well, I have an office in Scottsdale, Arizona. Again, another one of those God winks or whatever they call it. And I said, why don't you come by the office? And the weird thing happened. This is before cell phones. So I misplaced their number. So I'm thinking, oh no, I sabotaged myself. Here's this great opportunity. But a good friend of mine calls me up 2 weeks later and he says, Patrick, I met these people. As soon as they started talking to me, I thought about you. You need to meet them. I didn't know who they were. They show up in my office. It's Linnea and Larry Gillen, and they have their device with them. And we went, wow, this had to happen. And
Wow.
so I helped to reverse engineer the technology because the doctor that passed away left no plans. And we built out a little prototype, and that prototype became the MC Square, which we then built in our back office. Like you hear about people doing it in their garage, we did this in the back office. There was a company called Radio Shack where we bought all our parts from. And as we built it, it became more and more popular. And we went to the Consumer Electronics Show and we got an award called the Best New Gadget of the Year back then. But if you could imagine, this was before cell phones, before CDs, downloads. I still remember we were on the cover of the Consumer Electronics Show's dailies, they call it. And we had a lineup of about 200 yards, people waiting to get on our equipment.
Wow.
And the Rolling Stones were playing behind us. It was a really cool picture on the cover. And the because people were so stressed out at those events, they're walking around shopping, and we gave them a chance to pass out to the Rolling Stones. It wasn't always playing the Rolling Stones, but just happened to be on that picture. But we knew that we had something there, and but the problem was that it can't be sold on a shelf back then because nobody knew what it was. So I started a franchise company, and that franchise company was very successful. I sold it in 2002 and moved to the Bay Area, and was living a pretty good life there. And then in 2013 I actually invented 15 different devices between then and now. And some were for other companies, but mostly for myself. And then in 2013, I decided to reinvent it because it used to be a series of components, like a stereo components. And with technology, everything shrinks, right? It gets smaller and smaller. We have these watches you can wear now that are really, space age technology or whatever. And I was able to put everything that used to be in these two component boxes into the earphones and make one piece. And then, of course, with the app, we stopped selling cassettes and CDs, quite a long time ago. But we used to sell downloads, and we started the app, and that really opened things up. So when we combined the app, people do get good results with the app. I'm going to Brazil here on April 10th because we just beat out opioids in 3 studies using the app alone for fibromyalgia in women, and it's we had over 1,000 women in the study. And the Anvisa, which is the Brazilian FDA, is calling BrainTap a digital drug, and they're getting it approved for dispensing it in Brazil. So I'm going there to the universities that did the studies, and talk to the professors, and basically hopefully push it through so we can do the same thing here in America.
So remarkable. Okay, so let's go a little deep into this. So as we're talking about, you created something called BrainTap. For anybody that doesn't know what it is, we'll go deep into that. But basically, this is really it addresses so many things: to manage stress, to ignite creativity, to sleep better. Gosh, you name it, right? There's so many things. So let's first talk about what this app and also BrainTap is doing. It's really this idea of brain fitness. So can you kind of walk us through, what does brain fitness mean?
Yeah, think of brain fitness as your brain's capacity to work. Like when you have muscle fitness, you're able to exercise, work out, and also recover. Because some people work out too hard and they don't recover, they're burned out for the day. So how quickly can your brain do that? And I invented a piece of technology called the NeuroCheck, where we can actually scan people before and after. And that's when we go to the biohacking, when we see these biohacks really work. And so as we're doing this, what happens is through retinal flashing, the mitochondria in the eye is the most dense mitochondria in the body. And what mitochondria does, it absorbs and transmits light. Most people don't realize that they're transmitting 8-10 nanometer light. When you walk in the room, and we know people that when they walk in, the room's a little bit brighter, and some people walk in the room, it dims. This is we actually all have light. And during COVID, they actually did an experiment where they showed that people in a state of love and grace and contentment and compassion, they actually generate 200 times more light than people who are in a state of fear, anxiety, depression. So it's really important that we keep our light shining, and that's the part of the capacity of the mitochondria. Right now, it seems like stress snuffs it out. So think of stress as taking a campfire and putting a bunch of wet leaves over it and putting the fire out of the mitochondria. So what we're doing is we're feeding the brain light, which is the most underprescribed nutrient on earth right now. And we bring it in through the eyes and the ears. And both of them have different frequencies. So in the eyes, we use earth frequencies. So Erica, if you and I were on your spaceship and we're coming to Earth, and we say, wow, that Earth is resonating between 0.05 and 100. These are called Earth. These are Earth frequencies, but they're also brain frequencies because our brain generates those same frequencies. And we have cilia on the brain. These are little like hair-like follicles that actually are always observing our environment and changing based on our environment. Now we call it epigenetics, where we know that 80% of who we show up as changes every 40 seconds based on what's going on around us and what's going on within us, what we ate, what we think, who we're spending time with, all those things play into it. So what we want to do is we want to feed the brain and the body these healing frequencies. Most healing frequencies are between let's say 0.5 and 14 as the lower frequencies, and 40 hertz and above, which is gamma frequencies. The other ones tend to be a little bit more chaotic, and basically these are the ones that get people in trouble because they become overstressed. So what BrainTab's doing is it's reconditioning or retraining, just like Silva did, taking us to level. But we found there's a couple other magical brainwaves. Remember back in the 80s, there was no EEG really for public consumption. Now we can use things like the Wabi and the Muse and other little tools that we have, EEG, to measure the brain. And we know that when you cross over the 10 hertz frequency and also the 7.8 hertz frequency, that just happens to be theta, but it's also called the Schumann frequency or the earth frequency. When you pass over those, you get what's called a gamma burst and a delta burst, which means your whole brain lights up for brief moments. And when it lights up like that, the brain, there's an innate intelligence in every cell. Every cell has an intelligence. It's not like you just have this brain, but we have a thinking immune system. We have a thinking circulatory system. Everything is thinking and acting and adapting. And when you get these brainwaves, think of them like Wi-Fi networks, but they're healthy. They're telling the body what to do. So in other words, while we're speaking here, we need to have a good balance of beta, which is our reactionary mind, and alpha, which is our intuitive mind, or we wouldn't be able to have this conversation. So give an example, when we work with an autistic child, for instance, we find they have little or no alpha. And as soon as we train their brain, it usually takes 6 weeks to get 20% or more of their brain in alpha. Optimum is 30. If we can get it up to 20, 90% of those kids start talking because alpha controls this function. And it makes sense. Think about how many people fear public speaking. As soon as they stand up and they start stressing, they don't remember what they were going to say. And that's because alpha gets dampened. So what we know is there is a perfect brainwave actually designed and researched by somebody named Ann Wise. She's also from the Bay Area, and she was on our team with Light and Sound Research, and she traveled the world, and she found out that there's no one brainwave that's like the master brainwave, but there's a symphony of brainwaves that the body needs. And we still train to her master brainwave because we find it's the best. We've been doing that since the 80s. We just found different ways to get you there, but and the neuroplasticity piece is super important in brain fitness, because the more neuron connections you have, the more powerful your brain is. The less, and as we age, a lot of people have a misnomer. They think as we age, we connect our brain. The reality is that we were born fully connected. I don't know, the listeners might speak more than one language, which is a really good thing, because if you speak more than one language, your brain actually keeps a circuit alive that for people that only speak one language, by the time they're 7, shuts down. As an example, my science officer, we were in India traveling, and he was with me for 3 weeks. By the end of the 3 weeks, he's talking Hindi. And I said, Francisco, when did you learn Hindi? And he goes, well, we've been here for 3 weeks, but he speaks 8 languages. So his brain, basically, he's like a universal translator. If he hears something for a while, he'll just pick up languages. Some people have that ability. I said, why didn't the CIA snap you up or something? That seems like one of those people like on Alias where they can speak all these different languages and things like that.
Wow. So talking about, because I was like, where do I want to go from here? But just talking about the last thing you said. So how has, let's say 40 years ago, how has our brains changed in today's time with all the stress we have and all these outputs coming in? How has it changed? Because back 40 years ago, we didn't have obviously the cell phone. We didn't have all these external stressors, if you want to say.
Oh yeah. I still remember leaving work on Friday night and not talking to anybody about work till Monday morning. Those days are gone, right? But the way that the brain, when we scan the brain, what we're finding, our average brain profile, that except for biohackers, I can say they had the best brain profiles because they're taking care of themselves. And I'll explain that in a moment, what we've seen happen. But we're seeing about 65% of people's brains actually in delta. So think this is like you're running around with a parachute behind you all day long.
Wow.
And really it's a sign of inflammation or traumatic brain injuries. And I would say that not everybody's had that severe brain damage. So it has to be inflammation, that's causing it. And what we find is once you get the brain regulating, when you have too much delta, and then they put them on SSRIs, which is even worse, it compounds the problem. Most people have toxic levels of serotonin. They don't need more of it. They need this moment serotonin. They don't, That's the weird thing about most medical
So, you,
doctors. They don't really understand how the body works.
so you're
They
saying
think,
with so you're saying with antidepressants, increasing your serotonin could actually be harming your brain.
yeah, because it's yesterday's serotonin.
Mm,
You want this moment. Every 40 seconds, every gene pair in your body is changing based on the stimulus that you're getting from all inputs. So they used to say that was junk DNA, right? In 2003, when they mapped the human genome, they lied to us. They only mapped 1%, and they said 99% was junk, right?
mm,
And I love the expression, God didn't make any junk. So in the what happened was in 2017 and 18, they actually found out they had the computing power to realize that those 99% that they said was junk actually is changing so quickly
mm.
that they weren't measuring it. So it's adapting. We have a very adaptive system. People think we're these physical bodies, which is what we see, but the reality is we're 99.9 to the 14th power space and information. That's what's changing. We are changing as a species. So what's happening is we're being bombarded. The worst thing that can happen to a person is fear. Fear shuts down almost every mechanism in the body because fear puts you, it basically says, let's go into fight or flight or freeze.
Mhm.
Let's survive. It doesn't care about growth. So we need to have a growth mindset instead of a fear-based mindset. And over the last 3 years, unfortunately, it seems like our news wants us to all be afraid. And the reality is that we all have something called a psychoimmunity. This psychoimmunity, we know that we have a thinking immune system. And they also know if you have fear, stress, anxiety, depression, your immune system actually gets dampened. So we have this powerful immune system that can kill off. And look at what Wim Hof does. They inject him
Oh,
with poison. He breathes and goes in ice water and neutralizes it. I mean, if he can do it, that means other people can learn, right? And he's taught a lot of people. So what most people are missing out on is they think that all the power resides outside themselves. And the reality is the power resides within you. You have the power. I don't know how many times in every ancient teaching it says that. You have the power. The government doesn't have the power. They have the power of enforcement, but they don't have the power to make you healthy.
yeah.
They're focusing on sick care. We need people to focus on health care. Being healthy, thinking healthy, performing healthy acts, and being basically our true selves.
I love that. I love that message in itself. So let's talk about what this. So when somebody, gosh, there's so many questions I have. So when somebody puts the brain tap headset on in the meditation, they're seeing lights, they're hearing the sound, they're hearing music and the beats and whatnot. So what is exactly happening when they put this on? Like, what's the process of what they're going to go through?
Okay. First of all, for anybody listening that wonders if they need to believe it, I always tell people belief is for Sunday. This is science. We have a lot of science. We have actually 12 universities that we're working with right now. So what's happening is through your brain, remember, is always adapting. So your eyes right now, as we're sitting here and communicating, your eyes are processing 2,000 pieces of information. But guess what? Your eyes are sending 10 million pieces of information to your brain.
Mm.
So that means you're making all this up. So what are you making up? What are you seeing, hearing, or experiencing? When you walk out to the kitchen and you can't find the salt shaker, and you ask your spouse or boyfriend or girlfriend, you say, hey, where's that salt shaker? And they say it's right there and you can't see it. And then when they come out, it's there. You didn't render it. In
Mm.
neuroscience, we know that you only render about 20% of your reality and you make up the rest because reality is happening too fast. So what we're going to do is we're going to supply light that's very specifically tuned to train the brain to go into these altered states. Now, the reason we need to go into these altered states is we have a natural propensity as humans to basically get high, but the problem is that we want to get high on our own supply, as Wim Hof also says. We have our own supply, and when our brain's balanced, we start feeling really good. We start
Mm.
to be that person that we want to be with, and we start acting in a way that we want others to act. So light is really important. And what we find when somebody meditates without light, without retinal flashing, 30% of their brain shuts down. When I was in Ames, Bhopal, which is the All Indian Institute of Medical Sciences, I do a lot of research with them. And Dr. Varun said, Patrick, because we put people that had never meditated up against gurus, and we beat them with BrainTab. with not going to a spiritual place, just showing them brainwave activities, because
Yeah.
just going there doesn't mean it. But what he said, he goes, "You're cheating." He goes, "This is cheating." I said, "Well, have you ever used a candle to meditate?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Well, candles flicker at 10 hertz frequency. That's why they're relaxing.
Wow.
The candle flickers, the brain responds, creates acetylcholine, calms you down, you become relaxed, you become more creative." And we mimicked our program, actually, the eyes off of flickering light. The problem is you can't change the flickering effect of a candle. It's always 10 hertz. That's why I like to tell people, if you're on a romantic getaway and you make a fire, and then everybody gets a little frisky and you get lucky, that's because you're both sitting there with all these neurotransmitters that make you feel good. So you start to associate them with whoever you're with. And that's what you do. You create the environment, right? People say, "I want to create the mood." Well, the body is responding to that. So in the ears, what we've done with light is that all the blood in your body circulates through your ears every 3 to 4 minutes. Now, it takes 45 seconds than the rest of the body to go circulate through the body, but the ears have all that cartilage. So it's a great place to have light therapy. So all the blood goes directly from the ears into the brain, because it controls the temperature of the brain. So if we want to mainline light into the brain and create more ATP, which basically, for those that don't know how the light works, it creates vasodilation, blood flow, microcirculation. And all of this happens very quickly because the body's used to. We're light beings. We're like solar panels. So the body absorbs this light, goes into the brain, and when it finds a cell that's about to die, it gives it energy. Now, what we find is most people, remember they were in Delta, I talked about that earlier, most people don't have enough energy to do the work. So when they try to meditate or they try to create brain fitness, they try to get more, let's say, have more consciousness or more cognitive skills, they basically pass out. I know people that open a book and they smell ink and they pass out. Their brain doesn't have enough energy to do that. So we're going to give the brain energy. Now we can do the work. So music is also part of the equation. There's something called the Mozart effect. And this has been well studied. In fact, if you've seen the movie Baby Genius, it's actually based on that research. And what they showed was if you played music for children, they became smarter without doing anything else. Just play classical Baroque music and your brain works better. It's not just Baroque classical music, it's the beat frequency of that music. It's 10 hertz frequency music. Wow. So they basically, Mozart and the gang, they said they channeled that from the spheres, like he heard it. They said, "Where did you get the music?" He says, "I'm hearing it." So somehow he heard the music of the spheres and translated it into his symphonies. So what we've done, we use that. We also use binaural beats and isochronic tones. These are very specific frequencies. And over the years, now with neurofeedback and neurotechnology, we can actually track the brain and how quickly can we go from being wide awake in beta to being in deep sleep in delta, at night, or create a training for SMR that we need in the morning. We call that digital coffee. And all these kind of things that we do, we can now track and see if it works. Now, what we've done on top of that, these all change the way we express, but then we put words. Now, we have over 600 sessions that are just music. So if somebody's wondering, you don't have to listen to words. But the words change 2,400 gene expressions. And the average person out there thinks 80,000 thoughts a day and 60,000 of them are negative. So if you don't upgrade your thinking, someone else will. And usually it's like a 3-letter broadcasting system. You have to choose what you're listening to. That's why they say choose your books wisely, choose your friends even wiser. These people are either gainers or drainers. You want to be around people that are gainers for you. If they're draining you, they might get a big payoff. I know there are a lot of people say, "Man, I love being around you, the energy." And then when they leave, I'm like, "Oh man, I got to go do something to raise my energy," because they're there to kind of usurp your energy and power. And I feel like one of my jobs is to teach people to get their own light to shine, get their own energy system online so they don't need or become dependent upon others. If we could add to the grid, just like a solar panel would add, and you get a payoff. So that's what BrainTap is doing. Now we have very specific sessions, over 2,000 sessions. So, and we're always building more. One of the ones we just created was called Overcoming Overwhelm, because people are so much in a state of overwhelm right now, they don't know what to do.
And so you use that's what's so fascinating is there's kind of something for everything, what I've learned. And like you said, there's over 2,000 different, and some could just be music, but then there's I think you could call it positive psychology or NLP, reprogramming your mind and your subconscious while you're sitting there and not even aware of what's going on because you get into this meditative state. Uh, would you also say it's somewhat hypnotherapy?
Yeah, it's similar to that in that I say that prayer, meditation, hypnosis, they're all taking you to the same place. It's just a little bit different. What we do, I tell people, we teach you how to think, not what to think. You'll notice in BrainTap, I ask you a lot of questions while you're in that state because the
Really?
brain works best when you give it something to do. So if I said to you, for instance, a lot of people believe in affirmations, which they can be powerful if you believe them. If you don't, they can actually hurt you. So if somebody's standing there and they got a pile of bills and they say, I am prosperous, but inside their emotional state is saying, you're a fraud. You can't do this. That's why. But if you said, what would life be like if you were prosperous?
Mm,
How would you see the world? What would you do differently? What
that's
kind of
great.
home would you live in? And then the brain starts picturing those things, and then it creates what we call structural tension in consciousness. And then that consciousness bubble kind of goes out, and you're magnetically attracted because they know thoughts are more than things. Thoughts actually attract you to the things that you're thinking about most. I tell people, have you ever bought a car and you drive it off the lot and you thought this was the only car like it because you spotted it, and then you drive home and you find 15 of them on the way home, but you didn't notice them before because it wasn't in your awareness. So what we
Mm-hmm.
want to do every day, we want to be more aware of what's positive in the world. There's more positive going on in the world than negative. They got to scour the whole planet to give us 30 to 40 minutes of bad news every night. But
Yeah.
there's so much good news going on, we need to start sharing more of that.
Beautiful. Yes. Okay. So another thing that I know is so powerful, and I was really fascinated with this, is that actually 20 minutes of brain tap could actually put you through all the stages of sleep. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah. Our sleep study we did in Australia, which was because a lot of people are concerned about blue light, which you should be concerned about blue light. But if you don't have blue light, you're going to be depressed, anxious, and stressed out. So there's a balance of blue light. So 90% of our people use it right before bed. So we went to Australia, Western Australia, where there's coal miners. These are people that go to work in the dark, they work in the dark, they leave in the dark, they don't have a circadian rhythm.
Oh,
We
gosh.
were
Wow.
able to, in 3 weeks with the headset, improve their sleep scores 70%. We were able to, in 6 weeks with just the app alone, get them to the same place. So our body needs that light to reset the circadian rhythm. Now, it's a different light than what we see on our screens. Our screens have what we call dirty light. Anything below 450 nanometer light is going to be harmful after 6 o'clock or trigger different neurological activities. You don't want to overexpose, but your eyes are closed with BrainTap. So we're really working with the cranial nerve too. And we're basically just telling the brain, we just want the brain to stay awake. When we put somebody on EEG when they're meditating, especially first time meditators that had no training, they
Hmm.
basically stress themselves out. Their monkey mind goes crazy. As soon as they close their eyes, they're arguing with themselves. There's a saying, if we talk to other people the way we talk to ourselves, we'd have no friends.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
have to be more compassionate and more loving to ourselves, right?
Yeah. And so when you're wearing this and you're doing it for 20 minutes, you could feel like you just had a full night's rest.
Yeah, most people will hear, if they're listening to one of the audios, they'll hear, hello, this is Dr. Patrick Porter, and then eyes open wide awake. They go, hey, what happened? And that's perfect because like Bruce Lipton, one of my friends, and we bring him out to Quantum University all the time, where I'm the dean of brain-based wellness there. And what he says is 95% of the time our subconscious is running the show, not our
Mhm.
conscious mind. So people spend almost all their time trying to change that 5%. It really has nothing to do with your behaviors because under stress, we've all had the experience where we said, man, I wish I'd have done something different. I wish I'd have ate something different. I wish I'd have done, but the problem is because stress drives emotion and emotion drives behavior. We don't make the right choices. Our oblongata gets hijacked. That's the reasoning part of the brain. We just do what feels good. What's going to get us out of pain and get us more into pleasure.
Wow. So would you say that stress or lack of sleep are the main causes of brain, our brain not working properly?
Yes, and I'd reverse that order. It's sleep first. If you don't
Yeah.
get sleep, think of sleep as your incubator for your superpowers. It's going to prepare you for yesterday, processing yesterday in a way that's useful and meaningful for you. And it's also going to prepare you for tomorrow, because I believe what Deepak Chopra said in his book, Perfect Health. He said 95% of what's going to happen to you tomorrow, you know about today. So what are you pretending not to know? But
Mm.
if you're stressed out, you pretend you don't know those things, and you get blindsided. Now, the reason that stress is so bad is there's a lot of environmental things, right? We have these environmental things. We also have food. I believe that takes. I'm actually writing a book right now with
Okay.
Risha Shakri, who used to be the head of Google Wellness, and we're writing this book. We call right now it's tentatively called The Third Wave, because the first wave is nutrition. You cannot outthink a bad diet, and you have to. That's one of the bigger stresses you can get rid of, and I think that's why biohackers are so good. When I
Oh,
scan them,
so true.
they're taking care of their body from the inside out. And that's how I started. My mom, I actually was fortunate enough to grow up in Battle Creek, Michigan, the world's first health food store. When we were kids in
Really?
the 60s and 70s, our fun time was going down to the health food store, because my mother, we were spazzes. There was 9 of us, and as soon as she took sugar out of the house and dyes and all those things, we became really smart kids, and plus with Silva learning that, all these things help. And then the second thing that most people are missing in today's society is movement. They don't move and breathe, and that affects our nervous system. And 70% of our nervous system is in our brain. So if we're not moving and breathing, our brain doesn't function. That's why they say sitting is the new smoking.
Yep.
So as you think about those things, even breath exercises, things like that. And then the third step now, which is more important than ever, is brain fitness. What are you doing to keep your brain well? Because we're all going in one direction. I don't know anybody who's mork from orc that's aging backwards, right? And one of the misconceptions that I'm trying to change in the world right now is that people think elderly people are supposed to lose their memories. This is totally false. There is no ancient tribe, no ancient tradition that says, let's keep all the wisdom of the tribe with the youngsters. They keep it with the elders. So that must mean that our diet and our lifestyle is causing our brain not to function the right way. So, whether it's seed oils, sugar, sedentary lifestyle, negative programming on television, whatever it is, it's the dumbing down of the world. I mean, we were smarter before we have all these things, and it's like and those people that are active, when we measure, and we've measured a lot of biohackers now, over the last 5 years, and I would say that by a large margin, they are the most fit, the best prepared, and they walk their walk. I mean, when I go to a medical conference, these are the walking wounded, the dead. I mean, these are the people that are supposed to be teaching us how to be healthy, and they
Isn't
are
that crazy?
terrible. Yeah. I mean, natural medicine doctors do better, but no one beats a biohacker. I mean, when you measure like Ben Greenfield, or you measure, Dave Asprey, these people that have been proving, or even Jim Quick, these kind of guys, they're doing what they say they're doing. So that's why
Absolutely.
people follow them.
Absolutely. I'm all about it. Like I was mentioning to you, I went to the health optimization summit and I was just blown away, fascinated, like total, like soaking up all the goodness, and so intriguing, right? Because, if you do care about your health, obviously you need to equip yourself with the knowledge, like, how do I become healthier? What do I need to do? What do I need to change in my lifestyle? And I think, you pinpointed on some of the key factors, obviously optimizing your sleep. And a lot of people, this is the big thing. Like, it's actually one of the things that is coming up so much in personal development right now. And I know this is the conversation about sleep being number one, and everybody's saying like that get dialed in first. And there's ways to do that, the Aura ring, and there's ways to measure it. But the other thing, the diet is such a key component. Like the sugar alone, I'm just curious, sugar alone, what does that do to your brain?
Oh, if you put, we've done pre and post with even one drink of alcohol. And I'm not saying I don't ever have one drink or two, but I have to know, now that I know what happens, I know the next day I'm gonna slowly drink that drink and try to make it last as long as possible, because I'm not drinking to get high. I'm just drinking to be a part of the group or whatever.
Right.
So most of the time I don't. But that sugar directly affects, because the brain gets tricked. The brain needs fat for fuel. not
Mm.
sugar for fuel. So it gets tricked and it thinks, because the brain gets 25% of everything. Think of it like the king, it gets its tax. The brain tax is 25% of everything that comes in the body goes directly to the brain first. Then the body gets the rest of it. That's why most people, their brain is like the last thing to go. Typically, their body is ailing. They use their biological system to control their electrical system. And what I mean by that is we have a parasympathetic and a sympathetic drive, but then we have this neurohormonal system, and we can fake it out by eating sugar. We get this hit. In fact, most people get a buzz. Dopamine. Most people don't know how dopamine works. So sugar is like a dopamine junkie's best friend,
Yeah.
because you get a dopamine hit not by doing something. You get a dopamine hit by thinking about doing something. That's
Mm.
why, and I tell people jokingly, I said, you remember in college when you got all dressed up and you're going to go out to the bar and you're going to meet that special someone and you get all hyped up and you're all giddy. And then you get there and you go, this is a bummer, because it never lives up to your expectations. When Buddha said all unhappiness stems from unfavorable comparisons, that's what happens. So that dopamine hit happens. So you eat the candy bar, and the commercials play right into that.
Of
They
course.
show this angry person, then they give them a candy bar and they become this nice person. Well, they don't show them 15 minutes later when they're freaking spazzing out. I always tell people, I go, you want to know how sugar works? Just go to a birthday party. All these kids are acting really good, and then you feed them a piece of cake and you got these wild Indians, running around, and they didn't put any fiber in that cake to slow down that sugar. So here we go.
Wow. Actually, so talking about that, you said fat fuels our brain. And so I know one of the things that Dr. Hyman, or sorry, yeah, Dr. Hyman, he talks about is the one thing to feed your brain is omegas, most importantly. Is that one of the things that you recommend as well, because fat fuels our brain?
Yes. Also, what most people don't know is greens have fat in them, like spirulina and algae. This is how the fish get their fat. So you
That's
can
good
have
to
it
know.
directly. So I love energy bits, and I love a program. A friend of mine, Dr. Daryl Joffrey, has one. It's called Get Off Your Acid. And he's a television personality. He'd be wonderful for you to talk with. He's a great guy, but if you start your morning off like I do intermittent fasting, but greens don't count. So you can have a green drink first thing in the morning, as long as it's real spirulina
Oh,
and
I
real
didn't know that.
algae, then your body is going to get the fat it needs to start the brain working. And also hydrogen water is really good for the brain. It starts the Krebs cycle, and you're basically turns your brain on.
Hmm. Oh gosh, so good. We could go down a whole spiral of that. So let's talk about trying to think where I want to go. I know you talk about something called entrainment. So what does entrainment mean?
Well, we're always being entrained. So think about wherever you're at right now. Before you started this interview, you kind of did your thing. What you do every time, you set up your mic, you went through your little ritual. That's your training. So what entrainment means is if we're going to break up something, we have to entrain the nervous system, or make it get used to it. Like some people say, I'd love to work out, but I have to do it for a certain period of time, and then I will do it. You know what I mean? The training, they're entrained to do it. Like I have a brother-in-law that was a runner up, Mr. Idaho, and he would get all angry if he didn't get to work out. So we'd say, Jeff, go lift some furniture or something, because he wasn't getting that. His body wasn't trained to lift weights, every day, something. So our brain is the same thing. It's entrained. So, when people drive down the road and they see that donut place with the light on, and so they have to pull in, they've been entrained by that light. So we have to look at how are we trained right now, because it's all about education. Who educated us? Brothers, sisters, fathers, mothers, preachers, teachers. All these people created who we are right now because we accepted their training. Now, when we're talking about brainwave entrainment, we can't use those things so much. We have to use light, sound, and vibration because our body is already entrained to that. So to give you an example, if we don't get to sleep before 12 o'clock at night, we lose out on the melatonin production. In fact, every hour before 12 that we sleep, wherever we're at in the world, we get 2 times the melatonin production out of our brain. Every night when we go to sleep at 2 o'clock in the morning, our body is going to raise its temperature 2 degrees. Now, if you have a dysregulated brain, it can go as high as 5 degrees, which means you can wake up in the middle of the night with sweats and you get
Right.
anxious and stressed out and worried. Now, once you train your brain to sleep, you can sleep through the night. And another, just to give you an example, and then we'll go to the next question, is some people say, oh, I had to get up so many times to go to the bathroom because I drank too much water before I went to bed. This is totally false. You have a cycling pump in your kidneys. You could drink a gallon of water and never wake up if your nervous system was functioning right. So
Wow.
what happens is when you don't have the right training, then you get dysregulated and you go out of that rhythm. When we were in ancient times, we would watch a fire before going to bed. Remember, that fire is at 10 hertz frequency. So it's down regulating our nervous system after our fight or flights throughout the day. But also we're getting infrared light right before bed, just like all the biohackers do. But they were doing it naturally in the ancient. So I like to tell people all we're doing is we're taking ancient traditions and making modern technology. And so at home, people will have all the lights on in their home, watch the news, and then think they're going to go to bed. They just spike their cortisol and adrenaline, and they think they're going to lay in bed and go to sleep. We need to be thinking before you go to sleep. Do something. If you're going to watch TV, do a comedy or something. Something's going to, offload some of that stress so you can sleep through the night. That's part of the entrainment process. Now, the other thing is when you get into bed, what's your ritual? What do you do that prompts you to? I like to teach people the 4-8 breath in body scan, because especially if they don't own the BrainTap, because they need to train their nervous system. This is all about entrainment. So when you breathe in, you're actually triggering the sympathetic system. And when you breathe out, you're triggering the parasympathetic system. That's why twice as much breathing out is breathing in, at least for this breathing exercise. I know there's a million different breath exercises, but that's the best one. In the morning, we like to entrain them with breath by doing the breath of fire, which is a rapid nostril breathing, which actually triggers norepinephrine, cortisol, and adrenaline. You want those in the morning. That's digital coffee. We want our body to wake us up. And so, these are all things that we're entrained to. It used to be we'd walk on the earth and we would know, it wasn't just the Aborigines that knew what time it was while they were walking around. Everybody knew. You could look up at the sky and say, oh, it's this time of the day. Now we have smart watches and phones, so we don't have to be smart.
There's so many tools out there, or natural tools that we could work with. But going back to your BrainTap, I would love to hear, because I think this is really fascinating from some of the things I've learned already. What are some maybe extreme cases of things you've seen with people using either the meditations or the actual device, the BrainTap, that I want people to grab? I'm so intrigued by it. Like, I've used it only once at the biohacking conference, but it's so fascinating from what I've learned so far. So what are some extreme cases? I don't know if maybe autism, somebody that has extreme cases of suicidal ideation, you name it.
Yeah, we have had a lot of success with autism. We did a study in California, actually in Southern California, with Dr. Joquita Handy, and it took about 6 weeks. And what I was saying was, once they got their alpha up to about 20%, 90% of the people in the study started speaking with no education about it. The body started doing it. That was pretty powerful. I think one of my fun facts is we have a lot of fighters that use BrainTap, like UFC fighters and boxers. We have someone boxing in Vegas on ESPN here just shortly. But Corey Anderson was on ESPN, and they asked him, they said, he knocked out his guy in 42 seconds. And they said, how did you do it? He said, well, I knew I was going to do it when I was in the locker room. They said, what do you mean? He said, well, I was doing my BrainTap.
Amazing.
And I was listening to Step Into the Spotlight, and I saw myself knock him out in 42 seconds. So he went out and executed on his vision. I had one woman that came to me, and she said that they gave her 6 weeks to live. And she had an immune disorder where the immune system was actually destroying her body, which happens, unfortunately, way too often. And it was thinking her body was the adjutant, and so it was turning on it. So I said, and I said, well, let's set up 8 appointments. She goes, that's 8 weeks. And I said, yeah. She goes, well, they've only given me 6 weeks to live. I said, no, we're changing that. I said, As long as you have breath, you have a chance. The body can change. There's been too many miracles that I've been privileged to see or be around. And I remember at the 7th week, she came in. When she first came in, she looked like she was going to a funeral, wearing all black and just depressed.
Wow.
When she came in 7 weeks, she's wearing all yellow. It was springtime, so she was all happy. And I said, what did the doctors say? And she goes, I don't know. I'm going to see them next week. They're amazed that I'm still alive. When she went there, they said they misdiagnosed her. And so, and I thought we were going to get this statistic, that was going to be great, but they didn't misdiagnose her. What happened was the immune system was basically stuck. We call it neurologically locked. So basically, it was functioning in a high stress, super
Mm.
vigilant mode. We could, if you go online, I mean, anybody listening, they could just do hashtag BrainTap. You'll see story after story, hundreds of thousands of stories. I mean, the 2 years ago, or no, maybe it was last year during the Rose Bowl. It was really cool to see Leon Rhymes. They panned over to her, and she was doing BrainTap before she went out and performed. So people all over the place are using it. So we're really happy with that. And I did it kind of selfishly for myself first. It's great to see it all over the world now.
So by the time this episode releases, I will be releasing this episode. It's with, his name's Kevin Hines. He was the survivor jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. And he now talks to schools, and he does a lot of keynotes on helping people work through suicide prevention. And I remember in this interview, he says that it's not a mental health problem, it's a brain problem. And he walked through like his thing, because he still has suicidal thoughts, even though he will never take his own life again, because he did attempt to take his
Right.
own life. And he was saying, like, these are the protocols I do, and one of those main things is getting adequate sleep. And so he understands, like, I need to take care of my brain. And so would you say that is the truth to people that are experiencing suicide idolation, that possibly that is one thing that needs to be addressed, is their brain?
Oh, yes. I mean, what we find, the more dysregulated your brain is, the more anxiety, the more fear, the more anxiety. If you wake up in the middle of the night because your brain's dysregulated and you're in the hot sweats and you're doing all this, and that anxiety builds up, your body will work like Pavlov's dogs. I don't know if you've heard of that, but what happened was they'd ring the bell, right? And the dogs would salivate. Well, that's not where it ended. Actually, what happened was the dogs started salivating when the guards would open the door to ring the bell. Then the dogs started salivating when the guards started walking down the hall. Then they started just when they changed the feeding schedule, the dogs would still salivate at 6 o'clock in the morning. So what happens is when these negative things start coming up, especially without sleep, we know that even professional race car drivers, if they don't get adequate sleep for 2 nights, they actually drive like they've had 3 beers.
Wow.
So, if you think about impaired driving, we have impaired people. 2/3 of the world right now is not sleeping. This is when you take all of your short-term memories and make them long-term memories.
Right.
And if you
Right.
don't sleep, they don't get organized. They don't get prioritized. So what happens is you got this jumble of mess in your brain, and it's not been processed. Then you get up in the morning and you just get hit with, and some people just, the first thing they do is run and get coffee. If you need coffee first thing in the morning, you have a dysregulated brain. We need to do something to kickstart the brain. I love coffee, but I only have my cup at about 10 o'clock in the morning, because that's when I want to make sure I've been up for 5 hours or 6 hours. And I want to make sure that my brain is, regulated. And I'm going to have that, my own brand of bulletproof, really. It's not the official one, but I put a lot of fiber in there too, because I believe we need fat, fiber, and protein as much as possible.
Great. So informative. So if somebody was beginning this journey, like, okay, I want everybody to get BrainTab. That's for sure. Obviously, that will be plugged in the show notes. But if somebody were to, what is the best thing we could do to set ourselves up to get the best sleep? We've kind of walked through some of it. Maybe some supplements you recommend, because you just said what you feel is so critical, and really, how could we be more mindful of how we are managing our stress and setting ourselves up for our days?
Yeah,
The
I
best
think
recommendation.
a few main things is no alcohol 4 hours before bed, because especially if your brain's already dysregulated, like I said, 1 or 2 drinks in let's say your energy is 80%, because we can measure the energy across the brain. I've not had anyone yet that didn't have a couple drinks and break it down to less than 10. So right away, and we need energy to sleep. If you've ever seen children, they say, oh, they're too tired to sleep. Well, that's what's happening to most Americans. They're too tired to sleep. They don't have the energy to sleep.
That's
But they
interesting.
don't need energy in the form of caffeine and sugar. They need energy in the form of ATP.
Hmm.
And so what happens is one of the things you can do at night is start turning off your lights at least 2 hours before bedtime. So when you walk through the house, it's your brain's being told, I'm getting ready for sleep. As we said earlier, nothing that's exciting, because that dopamine hit will cause a spike in adrenaline and cortisol. And most people don't realize that when you have one stressful event, you produce that much sugar from your liver. So I wrote an article, it's one of the most popular ones on the internet, why stress is more fattening than chocolate. And the reality is that your liver produces more sugar than that candy bar. So if you basically spend your last hour before bed fretting over what you have to do tomorrow or how you're going to do it, it's really important you do some kind of mindfulness exercise. And really, if you don't have the BrainTap, just start thinking about everything you're grateful for. And when one of those negative thoughts come in Silva, they'd say, cancel. You just cancel it out. But you want to replace it with something positive. Think of all the people that helped you to get where you are today, and really start living from a space of love and contentment. And, you're preparing your body. While your body is doing what it's doing and you're doing what you're doing, your body can only do what it can with the information it has available. If you're stressing it out, you've taken your body offline, which means you're kind of out of the equation, because stress causes all that blood and circulation to leave the gut. And there's this thing called the gut-brain axis. And so when you have a dysregulated brain, guess what? You have a dysregulated gut. You're not producing. So, we have to work together. And we also have to tune into our heart. And it's not just a thing about love. Love is, I think, our natural state. But our heart has 40,000 specialized cells that think, remember, and respond. And our heart actually tells the rest of the body what to do, twice as much as the rest of the body tells the heart what to do. So at night, that's why it's so important that we just really get in the habit of being grateful. That's why saying prayers back in the old days, people would say their prayers, before going to bed. If that's what you want to do that, but do something that puts you in sync with the benevolent forces of the universe, if you will, instead of thinking about all the one thing is that the subconscious can take care of a lot of problems for you if you let it. If you want to control the whole show, it will let you do that too. When Henry Ford said, if you think you're right or you think you're wrong, you're right.
Right.
So we have to hallucinate really right before bed all of the wonderful things we've had. So the brain starts thinking about how to create more of those, because whatever we put our attention on, it grows. So, as we focus on those things we love, appreciate, and honor, our brain, just like taking that new car off the lot, will start seeing more of it. We'll attract the right people to us. We'll attract the right conversations. We'll make the right amount of money. We'll have the life that we want because we created it from the inside out, not from the outside in.
Yeah. And is there some supplements you recommend that will help get us more at a neutral with the stress that we have going on in our days?
Yeah, every night I go to bed with something called Get Off Your Acid. A friend of mine created it's a minerals, and they're good tasting ones. Sometimes they're not, but we need minerals at night before we go to sleep, because if not, what happens is the body will rob the bones of minerals. It will get their minerals one way or the other, because that's when it's going to do all the repair. Also, magnesium is really good right before bed, and those are the two main ones. But you can do. I like to do some. I do a liver. It's a liver B vitamin and a zinc, because but if you take too much B, some people will wake them up because it's energizing. I do my B. I do a B vitamin solution in the morning, but that's really good, because most of us are B vitamin we don't have enough. That's there's been so many research studies done with B vitamins, like B3, which is niacin. We need that during the day to help us sleep better at night. There's some things, there's a saying, win the morning, win the day. I think sleep starts first thing in the morning. If you don't start the day off right, then you're basically chasing health all day long, because you're chasing sugar, or you're chasing adrenaline, or you're chasing cortisol, whatever's going on. So I always get up, personally for me, even when I'm traveling, I have 2 hours, it's all mine. Nobody's around, even my wife. She's got she knows, hey, and I love it when some friends come to my house, because I have a game room, but it's more like a biohacking room. There's a pool table in the middle of it, but around the whole outside is, when COVID happened, I brought a bunch of my stuff home from my clinic, and he goes, we got to get doctors using all this stuff you have at your house. And I said, well, that's what I do every day. I do that. I do my infrared sauna. I do my meditation. I do my PMF. I do my light therapy. And I watch a little Gaia television, give me something to think about that's beyond the world. And
Yeah.
then I'm ready for work. I'm ready for what I do every day. And that helps
So,
me sleep better at night. And I look forward
yeah.
to that. I mean, that's my time. I don't bring my phone in there. I'm doing my own thing.
Yeah, that's so amazing. Okay, so if people wanted to get the brain tap, which again, I suggest people do, and I'm sure you're all intrigued now, like to learn more about it and dig further into it, because we could only touch on so much in this episode. But if people had the brain tap, how often should they use it to reap the benefits? I know there's different things they could do for creativity, for better sleep, and so, but how often would you
We
suggest?
find the first 21 days, we recommend doing it 3 times a day.
Hmm.
The average person hits their snooze button 3 times. I'm not a big believer in alarm clocks. In fact, I've never used them. Um, but if you are, put some music on, wake up, put your brain tap on. The 10-minute sessions are designed to wake up that brainwave called SMR. That's a sensory motor rhythm. That's when, as we get better looking and more intelligent with age, that's what happens with our brain. It atrophies. So we need that first thing in the morning, and that won't take any time because you're laying in bed anyway. Or set your alarm 10 minutes earlier. In the middle of the day, when your temperature drops and you lose your energy, and most people are going for tea time, that's
Yeah.
a great time to do it. Or right when you get home from work. And I always tell people, your family doesn't deserve the stress of the day, or your relationship. You'll have a much better relationship without the stress. And then when you think about night right before going to sleep, you don't have to spend any time doing it. Just put your earbuds in or wear the headset, press play, go to sleep. You're going to get the deepest sleep. Most people take 4 hours to go through their first cycle of sleep. With BrainTap, the average is about 20 minutes. Now you can get to the business of deep, restful sleep. And one thing I didn't mention before, we only turn on the glial lymphomic system, which is the lymph system of the brain, when we're in deep level 4 sleep. So those sleep apps, if you look at your anybody who buys BrainTap, you're going to find probably 10 to 20% improvement in that right away. Your deep
Wow.
sleep is going to improve.
So remarkable. So remarkable. And I know I also heard that this also helps pain, because pain is actually happening in your brain, not necessarily in your body. Is that correct? Did I say
Right?
that right?
We only process pain in beta. So when we're awake. So that's why they knock you out for surgeries. And that's why it was, when we created this, it was for pain clinics, but back in the 80s, opioids came along. Now we just did the study with opioids and we beat them. So it's people want to take a pill, a potion, or a liquid, just something quick, when we have the world's greatest pharmacy between our ears. Let's activate it. It can dispense 30,000 different neurochemicals with a simple thought. So let's start thinking the right thoughts and living that right life.
That's so great. And also, I know this is helpful to children as well.
Oh yeah, but I mean, my first book, Awaken the Genius, was all about, I was held back in second grade. I wasn't very smart until my dad, helped us with the Silva method and eating right. I think both those things helped, and children love it. I mean, I can't tell you how many, at least twice a week, I get an email from somebody saying, with a picture of their kid, saying they really want to listen to BrainTap. They ask for it because they have stress too, and they want to regulate
Yeah.
their brains, and these are all stories. So I tell them stories while they're on the brain tap, and I've converted a lot of the stories that into metaphoric positive stories, like flying the kite of kindness, and that's where two people are arguing about a kite, but then they decide to compromise and work together. And
This is actually like a meditation.
yes, for kids, I've
Wow.
written 43 of them that are stories that they get to learn about.
That's so remarkable. Okay, so what have we not covered yet that you feel is something we all need to know, just to kind of wrap this with a bow?
Well, I think the main thing, if they haven't gotten already, is that the brain is designed to transform and change. The brain's designed to heal itself, but we got to give it the right conditions. So if we get the right conditions, and the right conditions are getting you into the different brainwave states. So think of it like heart rate variability. We know that you have to stress your body out, you have to recover. The same is true with your nervous system. That's why it's so important to do like physical activity, then do a meditation. In I usually mention about yoga, which I'm a big believer in yoga. I trained with Yogi Bhajan's group for 5 years in Phoenix when I was single. I could get up at 3:30 in the morning and nobody cared. In the But what we know is that most people miss out on the most important part of yoga. That's the yoga nidra. At the end, when you lay
At
there, a
the
lot of
end.
people jump up and leave. That's
That
when you
used
get
to be
all
me.
yeah, that's when you get all the neuroplasticity. In fact, when I was in India, they will tell you that the corpse pose is the most important pose in yoga.
Wow.
So
Yeah, I remember I used to be that type of person, like, need to rush off, gotta go, can't just sit still. And I remember as I got older, I'm like, this is the best part. The end where you just get to sit there. As we get older, we get wiser sometimes. But it's so great, so informative. So where could people learn more? I mean, really, you're everywhere. I know they could really dive into Google, just looking up your name or BrainTap. Would you say that's the best way to find more information?
yeah, if they look me up, I'm at Dr. Patrick Porter, or it's BrainTap at BrainTap Tech. But if they go to braintap.com, we can also give you a special code to share with them,
I would love that.
and then we can give them the discount when they do that. So we'll do that
Perfect.
offline, and I'll get it to you,
Yeah.
and you can share it in the show notes.
Absolutely. Sounds so great. So, everybody, please, please, please go look further into this. I'll have all the resources in the show notes. And I mean, as you can tell, this man, he is wickedly knowledgeable about brain health and brain fitness and why we need to do it to optimize our health. And he is somebody that lives by that example. So, everybody go learn more. And just to ask you my closing question, you might have kind of answered it, but let's see what you come up with this answer. So I always ask my guests, if you were to share a piece of wisdom, a life lesson that you've learned along your own journey, and you just feel it's something that everybody needs to hear, what would that piece of wisdom be?
Don't believe what everyone's telling you about you. No one has the right to define you. You're different in every day, so live life that way. When I learned that from a good friend of mine who was my first publisher, that changed the way I was thinking, because I was 24 at the time, and I was always trying to act like I was older, because when you're talking now, I want to act younger, of course, because I'm older. But that's at the time, he said, just be you. Just be you. Be the best version of you. The universe doesn't make mistakes, and you're here for a purpose. Get that sleep you need so your superpowers are activated. And if you're going through something right now, every superhero had to go through the dark night of the soul. Once you get through it, you're going to find, whether you make money at it or not, that's going to be your mission. You're going through it so you can help the thousands or millions of other people who are going through that. And if you're willing to share your story and really have an outcome that's why we're here. We're here to share, to improve, and help each other. And I think if people understand that, we're not here to just take. Those takers, they never really win. It's the givers that the ones that realize that we're in this together. This is like Mothership Earth. We're here together to make this a better place.
Absolutely. Such a great message. Thank you for leaving us with that. Dr. Patrick Porter, this has been such an honor. I hope to see you at the Health Optimization Summit in London coming in June. I'll also plug that in the show notes, because that's where I learned. I mean, I love biohacking in general, but I learned so much more when I attended one of these summits. You get to meet a lot of the biohackers themselves. You get to go to the speaker events and hear more about a specific subject, and also find the BrainTap, because I know you'll be there and you'll have a booth where people could try it if they haven't bought it already when they hear this episode. But yeah, I'll plug that in the show notes as well. And also the biohacking conference, just so people could learn more. So this has been such an honor, and I just appreciate, gosh, what you've created. It's remarkable. Thank you for continuing our path forward and bettering our health.
Well, thank you. I'm out to better a billion brains, and you've helped us reach that today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.